Buchholz Plant Introductions, Part 16. The Mr. Maple Company from North Carolina has a strong internet presence, and recently they produced a YouTube video of the top 50 Buchholz maple introductions. I was surprised that there could be a top 50, as I guessed that I only introduced 25 to 30 new maples, but not possibly 50 or more. I've been asked a number of times about how many maples are Buchholz introductions, and my answer is always too many. Anyway, the Mr. Maple countdown was fun for me to see how another company rated my plants, but I don't necessarily agree with their subjective assessments. I suppose that Acer palmatum fairy here would probably rank in their top 10, but it didn't even make the top 50, and the reason was explained. It doesn't grow well for us. They struggle and die. Well, okay then, a sound reason to exclude it, even though I never experienced problems. After numbers 5, 4, 3, and 2, good choices, I was surprised that Acer palmatum, Japanese Princess, was rated their number 1, since I would place it somewhere between number 15 to 25. Our oldest Acer palmatum, Mikawa Yatsubusa, is considered the largest of that cultivar in the world by visitors from Japan, Europe, and America. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds nice, so I repeat it too. The fun part is that the seed is fertile and reliably germinates when many other cultivars do not. In September, we potted up about 3,000 seedlings that were Mikawa-like, which was about half of them. The other seedlings rose as normal palmatums, so those were separated to be used as rootstock for next summer's grafting. The Mikawa lookalikes feature the short internodes and overlapping green leaves like the mother tree, while one was selected for pinkish red spring foliage, and that individual was christened Japanese Princess. Since its introduction in about 2007, we have produced and sold nearly 5,000 plants. So from that perspective, I can see why Mr. Maple ranks it as number 1. My complaint with it is that it is more slow than the mother tree, and it is also subject to spring frost since it leaves out earlier than most cultivars. I have seen nice Japanese Princess in landscapes from Oregon to the East Coast, but I don't suppose it would fare well in America's Midwest. It is an ideal container plant, though, and it thrives in our white poly greenhouses. From the same champion tree of Acer palmatum, Mikawa Yatsubusa, another germinant was selected for blonde foliage, and that was named Mayday. It is a delightful dwarf also, but with the same problems as Japanese Princess. Other growers are raising seedling Mikawa as well, one of which, Kryptonite, features subtle variegation. A few of our 3,000 or so selectants are also multicolored, and the new owners of Buchholz Nursery, Mr. Maple, are excited about the prospects of the new cultivars. At twice their age, I'm definitely more jaded, and I doubt that anything new and wonderful will materialize. While I don't host expectations, I've experienced that wonderful things occur anyway, especially when one is not overly hopeful. How about a blood red Mikawa, or one that features weeping branches? Acer palmatum green gem is a weeping lace leaf that originated from one of the ghosts, but I don't recall which was the mother tree. I thought it unique for the bright pinkish new growth in spring, and it often repeats that event with a late summer push. I realize it will never be anyone's favorite, because for most of the season, it's just a solid green, and I judge Acer palmatum Spring Delight to be superior. Green gem turns to a brilliant red in autumn, however, and I find the cultivar to be strong and durable, and it adapts well to the full sun in Oregon's hot summers. That said, I would rate it as one of the too many introductions from Buchholz Nursery, but it has been in the marketplace since about 2015. I introduced Acer palmatum Redwood in about 2000. It was a seedling gifted to me to try from the late Edsel Wood of Oregon, selected shortly before he passed away. I never knew the seedling parent, but I always assumed it was from Acer palmatum, Sango kaku. And really, there doesn't seem to be much difference between the two. I came up with the redwood name because I liked the sound of redwood from Ed Wood. Apparently, there were 2 trees planted in front of the entrance of the USA's National Arboretum, but I never contributed or sold to them myself. When one tree died, they'd ask me if I had a replacement available, but I had already discontinued it by then. I never found redwood to be better or more winter hardy than the myriad of other winter red cultivars, but I know that some of the growers and collectors still champion it. Speaking of winter red stem maples, I'm familiar with a couple of dwarves that I prefer over the old standby Acer palmatum, Sango kaku. And that's because a dwarf tree is something you look at, not up at. I have a 48-year-old Sango kaku that's 100 feet away from my office window, and in winter, the only red twigs visible are at the very top, and the main trunk and branches look like any old seedling palmatum. In other words, it's no longer a coral tower, as the Japanese name translates. My introduction of Little Sango originated as a Sango kaku witch's broom, and it appears more visually colorful as it ages, much more than its parent host. Little Sango was propagated in about 2006, but at the same time I wasn't aware that there was another dwarf Sango, Acer palmatum, Akakawa hime, small red bark, from the late Del Laux of Oregon, and the two are very similar. I don't know which cultivar was marketed first, however, or if Akakawa hime also originated as a witch's broom mutation. The foliage of Acer palmatum pastel is hard to describe because it always changes. But when I first named to propagate it, I guess I was impressed with the softness of its colors. I now have images that aren't so subtle. In fact, they can be colorfully wild. I don't know the origin of pastel seedling, but it was likely an offspring from one of the Ghost series, and it was first propagated in about 2005. I also don't know now who possesses the first pastel, a history that I cannot recall, but that's a common theme with many of Buchholz's introductions. In the bustle and drama of economic survival, I allowed many plant sales to go undocumented because I didn't know that I would try to account for them later. In other words, who needs to keep the original tree or to remember its history? As long as you have sufficient stock to continue propagation. I can imagine old Noah squirming when trying to explain to God why an original arcoid had disappeared, when he couldn't remember to where or why. So, sorry, Mr. G. Acer palmatum red blush displays fantastic orange-red foliage in spring with prominent lime green veins. It was introduced in about 2002, but of unknown parentage. It's a shame that most customers are too busy tending to their garden center cash registers in early spring, so they miss out on red blush in its glory. It is also too bad that the foliage appearance goes into noticeable decline in summer when the hot temperatures arrive. It looks tired by July, and usually ugly in August, September, and then it doesn't particularly redeem itself with autumn color. Just a pale yellow is all I can remember. There are probably a couple of small plants still at the nursery, but I can't begin to tell you what direction to go to find them. A large specimen is still growing at Flora Farm, which I no longer own, and I haven't propagated any in the past couple of years. Buchholz nursery customers do not request red blush anyway, but hopefully it's still present in some collections, and perhaps it looks good for a better grower or in a more benign climate. Acer palmatum purple curl is specifically identified because the mother tree was clearly an Acer palmatum. Yet, some growers, such as Mr. Maple in North Carolina, suggests that it likely has Acer shirasawanum influence, so they list it as X purple curl. For me, it is afflicted with an awkward, untidy growth habit, as are many of the Acer shirasawanum cultivars, and we prune the hell out of them to form a presentable tree. Anyway, purple curl has a small, roundish leaf with lobe tips that curl downward. The summer foliage is a brownish red that would only appeal to a die-hard maple collector, and combined with its gawky, sprawling form, I wonder why I keep any around at all. But in October, November, the leaves turn to a brilliant cherry red, and then purple curl becomes a highly regarded favorite at the nursery. And even the employees snap cell phone photos. I'm not really sure why I named the 2010 introduction for purple coloration, for it never really displays that hue. But too late now, because we've already sold 400 to 500 grafts and a few larger specimens. I look forward to collecting seed one day, in hopes that it might mingle with a prettier cultivar, just as I did with my wife. One of the purposes of this Buchholz plant introduction saga is to brag and to celebrate our excellent achievements, but also to critique and fess up to the failures. And I readily admit that at least half of them fall into the too many group. One such is Acer palmatum, Rite of Spring, an upright cultivar that is really no improvement over what has been previously introduced by others, such as Acer palmatum Bloodgood. Rite of Spring arose in a seed flat, the only red maple out of a group of 70 to 80 green palmatums, so it was unusual for that. It was in spring, and I guess I was giddy with the prospects of a new season. The red maple was set aside for further observation, except that I immediately pulled a blank white label out of my work pocket and wrote, Acer palmatum, Rite of Spring. 15 years later, I conclude that I chose a great name, but that the maple itself is nothing extraordinary. Nice, but not really unique and special. You can describe it as a wonderful cultivar name in search of a wonderful plant. But ultimately, the name exceeds the value of the relatively mediocre maple. I wish I could reverse time, when I probably should have stayed at home that day. Acer palmatum Red Wonder is another introduction that originated as a random seedling of unknown parentage in about 1998. It occurred long before we had a website, and since I never liked the idea of outside of the company sales reps, there was no way to promote it. It resembled the well-known Acer palmatum Bloodgood anyway, so there was little point in continuing with Red Wonder. Another example of a great name in search of a better or more unique tree, and one no longer in production. I named Acer palmatum Lily L on a whim in 2019, and while it looks dazzling in the greenhouse, it is yet untested out in the garden. A chance seedling of unknown parentage, the name honors my daughter's friend, and if you knew the attractive, albeit zany girl, the name will seem appropriate. The wild coloration is most dramatic in the spring, as one would predict. But I've noticed that visitors can walk past the original seedling in August without pause. I imagine that if Lily L was placed in a landscape, the gardener will succeed best if it's grounded in afternoon shade in a sheltered location. Maybe it's a selection sufficiently tough to endure harsh conditions. But like the girl it was named for, I suspect that Lily L is fragile and needs coddling. I clearly have an attraction for the ghost-like selections with subtle green variegation. Acer palmatum Miwa was introduced about 2008 as a seedling from Acer palmatum Sister Ghost, and like its mother tree, it is surprisingly durable in the landscape. Miwa evokes a feminine presence, at least for me, but the lady can kick up her heels in autumn with vibrant colors ranging from yellow to orange at first, then evolving to a deep red and purple. I asked my Japanese wife to suggest a name, something in her language that would celebrate the maple's serene appearance. She immediately responded with miwa. For me means beauty, and wa is the word for peace. I liked the peaceful beauty designation, but I asked Haruko why the name wouldn't be Wami. Why place the words in the wrong order? Haruko ended my query with the comment, "That's just the way it goes." We sold Acer palmatum Ero for a couple of years, but then abandoned the cultivar because the similar Acer palmatum eye candy displayed stronger variegation. The original seedling is planted in full sun at Flora Farm, and it's a large, dense bush, about 8 foot tall by 8 foot wide. Like eye candy, Ero originated as a seedling from Acer palmatum Alpenwise. Our large mother tree of Alpenwise, maybe the largest in the world, was gifted to me in about 2000 by the late finder, Bob Baltzer of Oregon. Nearly every year, a carpet of hundreds of seedlings germinate under the 35-foot-tall, vase-shaped mother. These aspiring germinants are eliminated with herbicide as if they were mere weeds. Although one year we potted up about 100 for fun. While many displayed variegation, none were an improvement over Ero, which we had already discontinued. Ero was named by Haruko, where Ero equals color. So, the name literally means color then? Well, no. Ero means a variety, as in many kinds of color, or non-predictable color. I'll finish today's blog with Acer palmatum marmalade, a new introduction which features bright orange spring growth. There's a host of Acer palmatum katsura types already, so it's still unknown if it will be an improvement. I haven't sold any to date, but I have given one away, so from that point of view it has been introduced. If you are a specialty nursery or boutique garden center wanting the rare and exceptional plants your customers love, register as a wholesale customer on buchholznursery.com today.